What was Australia like peak pandemic?
Oh gosh, well, peak pandemic, I was pregnant. So my
Whoa.
experience of it, I felt a lot more probably vulnerable. But I will say we were in a state in Queensland, so we're a bit more north, that we were relatively unscathed. But some of our other southern states, which you probably saw where it was like very totalitarian, and that was bad. And every time we visit that state, it always comes up with the people that you interact with. It's like they have got some serious PTSD. So I think they were the harshest locked down place in the world. It was like you can't leave this couple of kilometers radius. You can't go out for a walk with more than one friend. It was just like next level. They all had a curfew at night. They had to be back home in bed, 8 p.m. every night, like things that people just wouldn't even believe. So it was bad, but we were lucky.
Wow. Is Queensland like the Texas of Australia?
I would say it definitely has become, and certainly where we live, the Sunshine Coast, a mass, our housing went up massively and a big price drop down there. But we've got better weather and like a gorgeous state anyway. But yes, massive influx up there for sure.
Yeah, that happened here too. Yeah, much to the chagrin of native Texans.
Yes, totally.
Everyone was moving here from New York and California. They're like, get the hell out. They're like, I'm not going to vote. Don't worry.
In Australia, we don't get a choice about voting.
Really?
Yeah, if we don't vote, which Maddie and I missed the last one, but we get fined. So you have to pay $100 if you don't vote. They actually want every single person to get out there and vote.
Wow. Wow. The thing about voting is you only have two choices, at least here, I'm like, well, I don't like either choice.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't believe in the premise of a ruling class to begin with. So it's like, where's the third vote where you're like, no politicians?
Yeah, just make your own little box.
Self-governance, that would be my vote, but that one's not on the ballot yet. So I'm excited to talk to you today. I say this many times on the podcast about niche topics that I can't believe I haven't covered this yet, right? I've been doing this for 9 years. I've been on the path of discovery for all things healing for 28, 29 years. And I always think, okay, I know everything there is out there. Not that I'm an expert in it, but I'm aware of it or I've tried it. And homeopathy is one that has just slipped by for some reason. Literally, as I was telling your team before we started, all I know about homeopathy is in the drugstore for a long time. I've seen these little, I forget the name of it, but they're like little sugar pills if you get a cold or something, right? And it's like, you take the little sugar pill under your tongue, and I'm sure I've bought them a few times, and I don't know, the pharmaceutical cold medicine seems to be stronger and work better. Or the other one was arnica, like the little arnica sugar pills. If you bumped your knee or something, you'd take those. But I literally know nothing about it, so I'm so excited to talk to someone like you that seems to know a hell of a lot about it. And after hearing you on the Way Forward podcast, I was just like, what? I got to get on board with this. This is too interesting. So I'm stoked. That said, I'm sure some people listening will have some familiarity with homeopathy and some not to varying degrees. So give us kind of the 30,000 foot view, very basic explainer, and then we'll get into the weeds.
So it is an energetic system of medicine, and it really operates on the premise that every human has, and not just human, but like plants and animals, we all have a unique vital force. So this is like our energetic blueprint. The moment the sperm reaches the egg and you see that flash of light, that little zinc spark, it's a divinely intelligent force that goes forward to build, the baby. And from the moment that we're born, that energetic field, it never leaves us. And it really is incorporating your mental and emotional aspects, but of course your physical, what you inherit. So as homeopaths, we really acknowledge that we inherit energy from our parents. So we're not so big on genetics, but we are big on energetics that we inherit. And so it's a system of medicine that harnesses from nature unique vibrational frequencies. So all different plants have a very unique vibration. So too with minerals and, human tissues. And we cultivate those unique vibrations to recalibrate that of a ill person. So somebody who's expressing symptoms, we then go through and we look at exactly what the distortion of energy is in that person. So let's say they've got asthma, and then we match it up with that unique vibration that we've found in an element of nature. And when we give that to the person, it stimulates their vital force to push back against the artificial stimulus. And it's the process of like cures like, that the body then overcomes those symptoms and healing and health is restored. So it's energetic at the foundation. It very much is relying on the human's body knows what it needs to heal, but it's that stimulus, it's that energetic impetus to have that healing triggered. But yeah, that's really the essence of homeopathy. And there's so many different
perfect sense.
Yeah, things you can do.
I think about health. You have like a broad spectrum of health, which would include mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. But in terms of physical health, not that you can kind of really parse it out because we're one being that encompasses all of those elements. But with the body, I've always thought of it like, if you have symptoms and you're sick, the problem is really just two things. One is that you need to stop doing whatever it is that is causing your body to be sick, and you need to give it whatever it requires to heal. Like there's something that needs to be added, something that needs to be removed. It's kind of, subtract one, add one. So this makes perfect sense to me that it's like, the body doesn't need to be told how to heal your arm when you cut your arm, right? It's like everyone, we just have faith in that. You just know, as long as it doesn't get infected and you don't need stitches or whatever, right? But you break a bone. It's like, as long as the bone's set, give it a little time. Somehow magically your body knows to put the bone back in place and not do it backwards or something, right? It's the bone fuses, the skin fuses, like everything kind of comes back together. But for some reason, many of us have a hard time believing that things like allergies or fertility or issues that are going on internally, that the body lacks the intelligence to be able to do it there too. It's like got to be something kind of at the gross level that's visible. And we just take that for granted. But if someone like you starts talking about, an alternative way of healing that is on the energetic realm, I think many of us kind of have a block with that. And maybe that was my block when I'm in the drugstore and I'm like, there's not even anything in this thing. Homeopathic, it's a sugar pill. What's that going to do?
Yes, no, absolutely. And, we look at a cut and we rely on the body to self-heal because we see that over and over and we just take that for granted that the body knows exactly what to do. But then we look at, say, babies who are born with eczema. And let's say they were born like totally holistically, right? And they're not vaccinated and they're just, everything the parents have done is just perfect. They're breastfed. And then they're breaking out in this hardcore eczema. And the parents are like, okay, I know you have the capacity to heal, but what is it? Like, how do I do it? And I think that's the biggest block to a lot of people believing that we have the capacity to self-heal asthma, eczema, endometriosis, all of these hardcore pathologies, because they've not seen it done or they've not known that the tools actually exist. And that is found in homeopathy. It is miracle after miracle after miracle, hence why it has been, so suppressed.
And what led you to this particular area of interest in the beginning?
Yeah, like you, right? I was like, what, homeopathy? If I had not heard of it before, I just assumed, because I was studying at a college of natural medicine. So I was 2 years into a naturopathic degree. And you just think that I'm like 23 at the time. And I'm like, oh, I know all of the different therapies, And so when I had this lecturer who used to say to me, you would love homeopathy, And because I'd never heard of it, I just thought, must be riffraff, off to the side. I'm not interested in, any of that. And my sister at that time had been so chronically sick. So she was in and out of hospital for 6 years since she was 16. And she would be hospitalized anytime she had sex, and she would have a serious infection that would go like a urinary tract infection, but then it would get to her blood and she'd be on an oxygen mask. It was really hectic, and, IV antibiotics for a week and really full on. And that would be like every couple of months. So ultimately through that, my dad's a doctor and my mum's a hippie. And so I always wanted to do naturopathics because that was sort of the merging of the two, right? Like I loved the body, but I also loved natural healing. So I was doing that. And one time when my sister was in hospital and that lecturer said, "Oh, you'd really be a great homeopath," I was like, right, that's it. If you cure my sister's chronic condition, I will change my degree next week. And he's like, "Okay, cool. When can she meet with me?" So we just met in a coffee shop around the corner from my university. And for 90 minutes, he asked her all of these bizarre questions. He wanted to know what she was like as a kid. Was she outgoing? Was she clingy? What sort of events have happened in her life? Is there anything that she craves? Anything she has a massive aversion to? Like literally anything. And ultimately at the end of that, he said, "Okay, I've got a pretty good understanding of your physical issues, your mental and emotional issues." And he prescribed her this remedy, and he gave it, it's one that's in that kit, and he gave a little bottle, and he said, "Please take 2 drops every morning and every night." And I was like, "Are you serious? Like, she's so sick and you're going to give her 2 drops under the tongue in the morning and night?" I was like, "Okay, whatever."
And 2 drops that is something that's clear. There's no taste, smell.
Well, this one, we preserve them in brandy.
Oh, okay.
So you've got your sugar pills, which, really just taste like pure sugar. But with his remedy, to be fair, it was brown and it did taste like brandy.
Okay.
So mentally, you could be like, yeah, there's something in this.
Right. I think that's one of the blocks with homeopathy, as far as I can tell, is, when we take a supplement or something, it's like you want to taste it, smell it, feel it.
Yeah.
If there's not a lot of obvious substance to it, it's harder to give it credence.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And then what I witnessed with her was within 24 hours, she was having a lot of discharges coming out of her body, and mentally and emotionally. He had warned her that he believed that a lot of suppressed anger was actually the cause of this disturbance in her body. And she had this, anger coming up to the surface and just sort of like merging, purging out. And at that point, she had been bladder incontinent after all of this sort of trauma that she'd been through in those 6 years. Her bladder was pretty incontinent. So she'd have to go to the toilet every 20 minutes. And within a couple of days, she was going like hours, not needing to go to the toilet. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, like I can't believe it." And so I witnessed this happen with those 2 drops morning and night, and long story short, complete turnaround. She was told by the medical specialist at that point that she needed to be on prophylactic antibiotics every day for the rest of her life, and that she could not have sex. That it was too dangerous. And
man.
Yeah. So for a 22-year-old,
that's not like you can never go jogging again. Okay.
Yeah. It's don't have sex. You probably can't have a relationship. You probably won't have kids. And it all turned around. She's very happily married with kids and does not go back to hospital with these UTIs. So what I witnessed with that, I still couldn't really grapple with, because I thought, that's just not possible that those drops under the tongue could have done what I've just seen happen. And so then I said to him, "All right, okay, before I really change my degree, now I want to come see you. So you can take my case, because I need to experience for myself. If I'm going to invest in this as a career, I need to know what's just happened." And then I met with him, probably the week after, and then, had a whole lot of things unfold for me. And when I went to see him, I would have said, I'm really physically very robust. So I don't really know what we're going to try and treat here, but let's just see what happens anyway. Let's see what remedy you would pick out for me based on my individual, life circumstances, what I've been through. And he gave me a different remedy to my sister, and it was powerful, like what happened for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any particular pathology or symptoms?
No, but I'll tell you the things that I did have. So we went through, when I was 18, I took the drug Roaccutane. You would know it as Accutane over here, like a very suppressive, brutal liver toxic. And just for clear skin, it's like my skin wasn't even, why would I take it? But when you've got a dad who's a doctor and you're like, oh, but I could have crystal clear, beautiful skin. So toxic load. So that was one thing. I also got cold sores. So I would get a cold sore every month or other month, but consistently for, maybe 6 or 7 years. And he also asked me in that consult, what's the most traumatic thing that you've ever experienced? And I was like, oh, look, life hasn't been so traumatic, but my parents divorced when I was really young. And that would be the biggest source of stress for me growing up. Definitely just that tension was very hostile. And I'm the oldest girl. And it's like, I just really internalized a lot of stress around that. He's like, okay. I said, other than that, to be honest, I'm extremely blessed with all the people and relationships and stuff like that. So it's like, okay. And he gave me the remedy sulfur. And this is a very powerful remedy in homeopathy. It has a massive affinity for the liver and detoxification. But I didn't know anything, about this remedy. So he gave it to me when I was at uni, and I took a dose and I just threw it in my bag and pretty much forgot about it. And within an hour, I had this head-splitting headache. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm not used to getting headaches at all, So I was like, what on earth is this? I'm not dehydrated. Like, I've not had any alcohol. Like, why have I got this splitting headache? But I don't think too much on it. And I go home and I live with my mum and my siblings, and we're all having dinner and we're at the dinner table. And mum says something really innocent. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was innocent. And I have just like verbally spewed out my mouth something along the lines of, oh, you never cared about me, you didn't look after me, and something, to do with my dad. And she's like, what? Because they would have divorced 20 years prior, and it was very uncharacteristic of me to have this sort of thing happen at the dinner table. And so I leave the table, I go down to my room, and I am just sobbing, really. And I remember her coming down and like the look on her face, because she was just so confused. She's like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Tell me. And it's just coming out of my mouth. Do you remember when, and I'm bringing up these actual circumstances of, I was meant to go to his house early this day and you made me late on purpose. And she's like, no, I don't remember any of this, that you're saying. And then so after, maybe 15 minutes of me just blah, blah, blah. And she just gives me a hug and she's like, I am so sorry that I ever made you feel like that. And she's like, do you want to come up and finish your dinner? I'm like, yeah, okay. And it was just shrugged off then. I was really like, oh, I really felt her apology. And yeah, I just went back up and it was like it hadn't happened, So then we're eating dinner, go to bed like normal. I wake up the next morning and I have 7 cold sores around my lips and the oncoming of what feels like a head cold. And I have never had more than 1 cold sore at once. So to have 7, I just thought, what on earth? But I have, again, completely forgotten about this remedy. I've thrown it into my bag. I'm not thinking anything about it. And I go to uni, even though I'm like starting to feel a bit sick. And I'm in this botany class and I'm trying to look at the board and my eyes are starting to water and I've got like so much mucus. I'm like, gosh, I am actually really sick. I'm going to go home. And I walk out the door and I go down the stairwell and I bump into this homeopath, Peter, that I'd seen. And he's like, oh, how you going? I was like, oh, good. It's like, actually, I'm really sick. I'm going home. And he's like, oh, good. The sulfur's probably, triggered something. And I was like, you think this has something to do with the remedy? And he was like, well, yeah. And I said, well, I've got all these cold sores on my lips that have come up and I've never had this many before. And I've got a head cold and I had a headache. And he's like, yep, tick, tick, tick. That sounds great. Your body's doing the good detox process that it needs to do. And he said, one thing, don't suppress the cold sores with any sort of cream. Let it run its course. And I was like, okay. And he said, mentally and emotionally, how you going? And I said, oh, I'm fine. And I was like, but you know what? I did have this thing happen last night. When I explained it to him, he said, well, doesn't that make sense, given what we spoke about yesterday? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Then from that point, so that would have been, I'm around 23 years old. I'm 34 now. And so 11 years, I have never had a cold sore again since that. Since those 7 erupted out of my body, I've never had one since. And
Wow.
that is the power. And sulfur is known for its centrifugal action. So it's like that spinning out. So you usually have a lot of skin things come out. People who've suppressed things, like if you have had a history of eczema and you've used steroid creams, or psoriasis and you've used steroid creams, or Roaccutane with acne, the sulfur is going to spin it out onto the surface. And it's like this, in homeopathy, we call it the return of old symptoms. Whatever we've tried to suppress, often the body says, right, here it comes. I'm sending it right back out. The same goes, obviously, your mental and emotional things that you've tried to really bury down. And over the years, I've worked with people, and when they take a homeopathic remedy and they say, I cannot believe that this grief or these emotions or this resentment has resurfaced again, because I have done so much work and I truly thought I had let it go. And yet on a deep cellular level, the body can purge it out of the field. And when you see it happen for people, it's just so remarkable. And it's that moment that it's really transcended. I think when you've got it from that root vibration, then we're free of it.
It's so interesting because it's like, it seems because the substance is so diluted in a homeopathic remedy that it's like hard to believe that it would have the potential power to elicit that kind of reaction or those kind of changes, right? I mean, even thinking about microdosing psychedelics, it's like, if you take 100 milligrams of psilocybin, I mean, that's like way less than you would ever take if you wanted to get sent somewhere. But still, it's way more than if you did a homeopathic version of that. You know what I mean? I mean, there's still some substance to it. It's not just signaling. It's having like a direct effect, right? Where homeopathy is it's much more nebulous, it seems. It's just like, oh, it's just a very faint signal, and somehow the body hears that signal as loud, right? It's like, oh, wow, something's happening here. It's so interesting.
Do you know what's crazy is the more you dilute it and succuss it in a pharmacy. So obviously we have a lot of homeopathic pharmacies, and it's a very rigorous sort of process they use. But the more that you dilute it and succuss it, the more enhanced, and stronger that vibration can be that the body can perceive. So you would think that it would get weaker, right? Because if you had a drug or a herb and you were just diluting it, diluting. But it's this succussion process where it's being banged around, and it's like the energy is unleashed from that plant or that mineral. So you really see the power of it. And, it is remarkable that you'd think a drop under the tongue could do it. Like, one of my favorite examples for anybody who's ever sus on homeopathy, especially, for women, I say there's a homeopathic remedy called folliculinum, and it's based off homeopathic estrogen. And the power of that remedy, if you take one dose, literally just take one dose, your next cycle, I would say 7 out of 10 of those women will notice their menstrual cycle completely shifted. That cervical mucus, and it's the influence of that estrogen. And it also has the bonus of sort of detoxing the oral contraceptive pill, which a great majority of women did take at a point in their life. And so you can just see that it's like a drop under the tongue, like boom, one stimulation with the energy of estrogen can cause full menstrual changes. And it's like cascade of hormones. Like, it's that powerful.
That's crazy.
So it's remarkable.
If you want to crush the game of life, no matter what game you're playing, there's one thing you need, and that's steady energy that lasts. But chances are, if you're anything like me, you tend to hit a slump in the afternoon and reach for more caffeine or even sugary carbs to keep yourself juiced up. And no judgment there. I used to be right there with you, so I totally get it. But imagine if you could flip a switch and feel clear, focused, and energized, but most importantly, stay cool, calm, and collected at the same time. And to me, that balance is the true meaning of flow state. And how I get it is something called correct fuel. It comes from the makers of Correct Energy, the stuff I use to hit that clean dopamine zone on a daily basis. So fuel is the next move in your stack, and this is going to keep your brain and energy on point all day long. And this is what I'm using, whether I'm writing, taking meetings, or anything that requires a peak state. When I'm on the correct fuel, it keeps me focused and lit up without any spikes and crashes. It also helps me to forget about eating so I can get more done. Correct fuel is made with a bioavailable ketone that fuels the brain with clean, burning energy. And it's also a clinical-grade electrolyte stack featuring sea-based minerals and Himalayan pink salt, so you've got smooth, sustained power in every scoop. And studies show that dehydration jacks up hormones, blood flow to the brain, and cognitive performance. And that's why Correct Fuel keeps you sharp, hydrated, and focused right where you need to be. So get yourself powered up at correctlife.com/Luke, and correct is spelled with a K, by the way, and your code over there is Luke, and that gets you 15% off. And there is no hype needed on this one, just high-performance nutrition for high-performance humans like you. Again, that's correctlife.com/Luke, and we'll also put that link and code in the show notes for an easy click. Talk to me about the history. I think one of the things that really inspired me to want to have a conversation with you, as I was telling you before we started recording, is how you described the way that this particular modality has been vilified and squashed by the powers that be over the years. And that makes me much more interested in it.
Sure.
It's like, if the powers that be, or the powers that shouldn't be, I guess maybe more aptly stated, if they try to suppress something, then it means that it works and it's good for you. Therefore, it makes me intrigued. But, run me through the timeline of when, at least as far back as we know, when homeopathy began to be used widely, and why so few people are aware of it at this point.
So you're looking around the late 1700s when Samuel Hahnemann, so he's a medical physician, he's the founder of homeopathy. So he's graduated medical school, and it's really heroic medicine, around that time. And he's just watching, what they're doing in their conventional medical things. He's saying, I will have none of this blood on my hands. And so he resigned from that. And he started translating medical texts. And he was like this crazy smart guy. He knew over 11 languages, which put him at a massive advantage in terms of medicine, because he is translating the text from all of these different places where some people might have been limited by the barrier of language to understand what the Germans were doing, or, other countries. He was able to read all of them and translate it. So he was learning a lot. He then got the opportunity to work in the largest library of esoteric texts in the world, and that was in Romania under this Baron von Bruckenfell. So you can imagine the sorts of works that he's reading in there, all of these esoteric texts. So that's like Isaac Newton's work on, alchemy, a lot of it. Paracelsus. So he's reading and getting exposed to a lot of those concepts. So that would have been huge in all of the revelations he later had. He was very much helped by what he got to read and, learn through that. So then in his translating of texts, he's realized this principle of like cures like, and he starts to trial it. And he uses small doses at the start, but they were still doses that had enough toxins in them that people were still getting, side effects of this cures like process. So he kept experimenting with it and diluting it and succussing those crude elements until he realized, wow, I'm onto this. Now I've got no side effects and all healing. We can do it this energetic way. So he's really, founding homeopathy there and that. Where homeopathy started to get really famous was when there were a lot of these epidemics, historically, whether that was Spanish flu, cholera, scarlet fever, which back then, was wiping out a lot of people. And the cause of that, there's a lot of people have different opinions about what really was the Spanish flu. Was it toxicity? Was it something else? But regardless of what people think the root of the issue was, the reality is that homeopathy was healing people. And so you look at the statistics from those hospitals, a lot of people, in the US would not know that you guys had over 100 homeopathic hospitals built across the United States. And I'm not talking little clinics. We are talking big hospitals, sometimes 3,000 beds. And, massive, famous hospitals.
We know none of this history.
No. And over 1,000 homeopathic pharmacies you guys had all across. So amazing,
Wow.
In New York, Massachusetts, there's so many. And, you guys have your Washington monuments that you honor, people. You guys only have one medical physician that you have in all of those statues, and it is Samuel Hahnemann. So it was loved by presidents, a lot of the elites, throughout the years. I went into a Santa Monica homeopathic pharmacy the other day, and they've been open and operating for 80 years, but they had this photo on the wall and it was so gorgeous. And it's hundreds of homeopathic physicians, and they were getting their group photo at the White House. I don't know how old, was it 18 or not? Maybe 1920. The photo from then, but just beautiful. And so homeopathy in that era was revered. And it was really climbing in popularity. And when you look at the statistics from those hospitals, when the epidemics were coming through, you can look at the research, the documented number of people who died in the conventional hospitals versus the homeopathic hospitals. And it's very clear, where you're looking at conventional, the rates were around 30%. And in a guy named Dean Pearson, he did a massive study of 26,700 people who were treated homeopathically for the same, epidemics, and their mortality rate was 1.05%. It was massively, massively different. So that's when it really got popular. And you read the old texts, and the homeopaths, people would find out where they lived, and they would have lines around the block from people who wanted to come and get homeopathically treated in those times when they could see what worked and what didn't. So it's rising then. You've got people like J.D. Rockefeller, loved homeopathy. Most people know he's considered largely the father of modern medicine. But before he went down the petrochemical route, he loved homeopathy. His family had 3 private homeopaths. I mean, they always had them. They never let go of their homeopaths. He lived, into his 90s. And he famously said, homeopathy is a progressive and aggressive step in medicine. That's J.D. Rockefeller himself saying that. But then, he started to make money, and then he realized, well, we need to get homeopathy out of these universities, because it was like this domino effect of all of the conventionally trained physicians when they would come into contact with a homeopath. And they sort of talk about this in the old texts, is you couldn't put down the homeopaths for not being, I think, learned is what they would say in that era. Because the homeopaths, they were largely medical physicians first. So they stood in their sort of own power. They were very, midwives back then were sort of fobbed off and not respected the way they should be. But the homeopaths, it was an equal fight sort of back then. So whenever they would talk to their medical friends and say, hey, I have found this new way. Come and look at what I can do with this medicine. Everybody would convert because they were healing what they were told was incurable. So that's where it really got very popular. But yeah, then ultimately over the years, we've seen pharma rising up, the stronghold. They made it after the Flexner report. They actually made it a law in the US that if medical doctors fraternize with homeopaths, if you consult on a case together, we will strip your medical license.
Really?
That was an actual thing. But, there was only one place that they couldn't get away with it,
man.
and that was in Boston. And it was because they had so many high-up politicians that loved homeopathy. That was the one state. It took longer for them to get this in because they were just like, no, you're not doing that here. But yeah, so people actually lost their medical license, their right to practice medicine, if they were talking to homeopaths. That's how threatened that system is, because they know if they realized how the body actually works and how to actually heal things, even doctors in this day and age, a lot of people put them down because they're only band-aiding and suppressing, and we can see that. But a lot of them don't know that there is a better way, that you can actually do it, whether it's eczema, asthma, hay fever, allergies. They literally have been taught that there is no way, and the best option you can give is to help people suppress it. And if they really knew the essence of homeopathy and what it could achieve, well, we'd just flip everything upside down, because I think most doctors, they're good people at heart,
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I interview a number of doctors, more on the alternative side, but they're all really good people. And I think even on the alternative side, many of them are just sort of following commonly held beliefs because of the system that they were brought up in and indoctrinated into, right? So it's still kind of like, might be a more natural way with supplements and, blood testing and things like this to determine what's wrong, but you still have a lot of inputs to treat the symptoms that don't always, although they sometimes do, don't always address the underlying cause, So I'm someone who, rags on the medical system and pharmaceutical industrial complex a lot, because so many of them are knowingly evil. I think the vast majority are just people that are just in a system and that's all they've known. So they keep doing it. I mean, if you look at the way we do birth in this country and many Western countries, I mean, it's just absolutely barbaric.
Yeah.
And it's not that the people that are operating the system are barbaric. It's just that they're in a system that's barbaric.
And they just
they don't know any different, right?
They say these days, like your average, the doctor who's in that delivery room, they've actually never seen a laboring woman just deliver a baby drug-free, naturally, what that actually looks like. They don't understand physiological birth. It's like, that is so sad.
Yeah.
How can they be the people that we're trusting when they don't even know what that looks like a lot of the time?
Yeah.
For sure.
That's how far astray we've gone from just natural living,
Some of my favorite stories of the homeopaths who did convert, like where they started in medicine, there's one, and this guy's name's Constantine Herring, and he was actually part of the mainstream movement to tear homeopathy apart, to get rid of it. It's quackery, we won't have it, And he's this young guy, and he was really chosen in his university as sort of, I guess, like the teacher's pet kind of thing, as in like he was their star student. So like, you are going to be commissioned to go and write this article to tear homeopathy apart. So he starts reading and like investigating it. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't make logical sense. I can't imagine that this would work. But then he actually had a dissecting wound. So he was working on a cadaver and he cut his finger. And the mainstream, medical doctors then, they're saying, you need to amputate that finger. And he's like, I'm going to be a doctor. I want it to be, elite. I can't lose that finger. And he ultimately used homeopathy, arsenic amalgam, to completely restore, and heal the wound and get rid of the infection. And so then once you've seen and experienced homeopathy working, you become the biggest fanatic, right? So then obviously he goes on to become this very famous homeopath from, one side jumping over. And then, it's sort of documented. He's in the bars, standing on the tables saying, you guys are in the hand of cutthroats, these medical doctors, they're just, barbaric. And that's just the way it goes. We do what we do until we understand what we're doing.
If you've been through puberty or menopause or even the fabled manopause, you'll know that our hormones change throughout our life, and that's just how nature rolls. Now, what's not natural is that most of us no longer get key elements from our diet due to things like industrial agriculture. And when you're deficient in minerals, it can throw your entire system out of whack, especially when it comes to keeping your hormones in balance. And having enough magnesium in your system is a key to making that possible. So if you found yourself struggling with mood swings, getting stressed and irritated, or even craving foods you're not used to craving, you might be among the 75% of Americans who are magnesium deficient. To keep my hormones in check every day, I get a full spectrum dose of magnesium from Magnesium Breakthrough. It's a really unique product because it's got all 7 essential forms of magnesium, including magnesium orotate, which is amazing for metabolic and hormonal health. So to get yourself all magged up, go to buyoptimizers.com/Luke and punch in the code Luke10 to save 10%. For my routine, I take 2 capsules before bed, which also helps me sleep, and then 1 in the morning to help me feel grounded and relaxed throughout my day. So go to buyoptimizers.com/Luke and use that code Luke10 to save 10%. Okay, so on the more nefarious side of the medical system, going back to characters like Rockefeller, some of us, myself included to a degree, are of the mindset that because at some point medicine became profit-driven, that the incentive is not to help ill people heal. It's to actually kind of drag them along and create a lifetime customer, right? Like, maybe you can alleviate symptoms, but if you can actually keep that source of revenue alive for longer, despite whatever lack of quality of life they might experience, that much of the medicine and much of the system is actually made intentionally to keep people sick and barely alive, right?
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, how nefarious do you want to go? Is it just
I can go all the way.
Yeah, and it's just like, is it just a conspiracy that they want all the money from pharma? But realistically, what they're doing is it's dampening our spirit. Like they're destroying the human spirit with all of these drugs. And so even mentally and emotionally and our creative, potential as human beings is being really suppressed by this level of drugging and blocking the vital force at every turn. You run a fever and then you're taking, anti-fever meds, or like obviously the amount of aluminium that's being pumped into the body. And it's our conducting, our connection to God that is really being severed. So it's like on one level, yes, they're making a lot of money, but ultimately they're keeping us very much in submission. But when you see the power of homeopathy to undo those layers and you witness people connecting back to the spirit of who they really are, like under the layers of trauma and even the physical manifestations of disease, you actually see people tap back into real life and what we're really here for. And it's that creative potential. And when you look at the definition of health, Samuel Hahnemann, man, he said it so beautifully, but essentially what he's saying is our goal is not to just be physically symptom-free. That's not health. Health needs to encompass the human being having the vessel here on earth to fulfill their purpose. Like, what are you here for?
Amen.
And a person
100%.
walking around with things like even a fear of failure, right? Someone who has that crippling fear, so they stay in a safe job, that 9 to 5, and they never venture out. That's not necessarily healthy. That's not fulfilling your purpose. And homeopathy can address all manner of vibrational distortion. It's not just your physical things.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
That's how I think of it because I spent some time very preoccupied with the body and wanting to be healthy and warding off any potential disease and things like that. And then at some point, I think I evolved into more of that understanding that why keeping your body healthy is important is so that the soul that lives inside your body can actually use the body and have enough vitality and life force within the body to do what the soul is here to do.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise, like, what do we all just go to the gym and look beautiful and, anti-aging and all this stuff? It's like, well, what's the point? Like,
live to 110 in our safe little body. Yeah.
It's like, why are we in a body to begin with? It's like, oh, well, that makes, to me, it's more motivating to take care of my physical health if there's a greater purpose behind it other than just to stay on the planet longer, to, out of vanity or something like that. It's like, no, I want to feel good because I have shit to do here.
Yeah.
I have, big dreams and ways to be of service. And we all know when you're sick, it's like your capacity for contribution and creativity and building anything is greatly diminished. It's like you go into survival.
Yeah.
And to your point about, the system kind of being set up the way it is, when people are in survival, they're docile and easy to control, especially if you can make them afraid. There's no better way to control someone than to fill them with fear.
And another thing that I notice when people do get that vibrational alignment again and, they do tap back in, it's so interesting how many people, their purpose, what they feel they're here on earth to achieve, it actually is centered around helping others. It's this really beautiful, like more community oriented. It's like these people have these beautiful dreams to contribute things. And it's like when we are in vibrational alignment, if we're going to talk about how do we actually create new parallel systems, it really does take that new vibration of wanting what's good for everybody. That sort of self-centered, like I just want all the things, for myself. I want to be successful and happy and beautiful, and I want to live to 110. But what I notice under the influence of homeopathic treatment is that real connection back to each other, like the people around, and wanting to like drag them up and just let life be beautiful again, so much of what we've just forgotten, and I think that is such a vibrational thing. Yeah. I don't think
Absolutely.
No herb, no supplement can connect you back to that. It's spirit, really. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, if you're resourced and you feel fulfilled and able-minded, bodied, it's like, where do you, it's like when people retire, like if somebody is, like a kind, giving person and they've accomplished a lot in their life and they retire, it's a natural progression that they go into mentorship and contribution and they want to give back because it's like they've accomplished what they want to accomplish and they have resources on many levels that are more than they need themselves, right? So it's like, well, what do I do with all this wisdom or money or whatever it is, right? It's like, well, it's got to go somewhere. But I think that what you speak to is really important, that it doesn't have to come later in life, right? It's like, what if you're 25 and you feel so resourced and so vital that like you have no kind of choice but to express that and to share it and think in terms of us rather than me. It's like the scale from base instinctive survival all the way to being fully tapped in and awake and enlightened, it's like.
And I think that would be their biggest fear, because you look at people like Rockefeller and so much has been, conservative and keeping everything for our family and safeguarding everything and hoarding and power and dominion over others. But if you had thousands, tens of thousands, 100,000 of people tapping back in and like all of that illusion then just disapparates, and then you see that complete shift. Yeah.
What about the monetary side of it, right? So if a pharmaceutical company synthesizes a drug that's unique and they can patent whether or not it's derived from plants or nature to begin with, but they can patent it now and monetize that and own that, it seems obviously that's more lucrative than homeopathy. I mean, you can't like patent a remedy, right?
No. And this is the other thing.
It seems because so much of the source material is necessary to create the remedies that it's probably not like you got great margins, right? on homeopathy.
Yes.
It's like not a lot of the actual thing is in there and you can't patent it. But it seems like it would be very hard to build like a multinational corporation out of homeopathic remedies versus pharmaceuticals.
Yes, absolutely. And small amounts when you're talking about vibration, right? So if we go back to Cuba in 2007, so Cuba was using homeopathy for prophylaxis. They usually have an outbreak of leptospirosis after like hurricane season, which wipes out a lot of people in Cuba. So in 2007, there was an incident where there were millions of people left without a vaccine on one side And so they then used homeopathy, and they went door to door with homeopathy, and they used homeoprophylaxis for millions of people. And it's like with homeopathy, that crude dose vibration, it transfers across mediums so amazingly. It's like conducted in water. You put a homeopathic remedy, a drop of that into water, and you shake that up. You've medicated that water. And so I was watching some videos of this frantic rush for them to get that remedy out. It might have only cost them, it could cost as little as, a couple of $100 to homeopathically protect and give everybody a dose, like say 4 million doses to get that out. You could look at a couple of $100. You compare that to the other side of Cuba, where those millions of people got a vaccine. And yeah, financially, you're looking at extremely different, margins. But when you actually look at the results of that experiment, again, it's very clear what is more successful in looking after a human body in that way.
How are the remedies made?
So you get your crude dose of whatever it is that you're going to make up your remedy for to protect, give to the human body. And it might be, let's say it's a herb, let's say belladonna, the plant. You would take that into the pharmacy and you would make like the mother tincture of it. And so you get that dose, but then you're going to dilute it and succuss it. So you might take 1 drop of that mother tincture into another vial, and you'll put 1 drop of that, 99 drops of water. Succuss it, which just means like bang it around really hard, get all of that energy released and transmuted sort of like across the whole medium. Then you're going to take 1 drop of that, go across to another 99 drops of water. So that is the process of dilution and succussion. And it's fascinating, Veda Austin has done a lot of work around. She's shown some of the flash frozen different homeopathic remedies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. And
I
so
love
say
her.
like arnica, belladonna, they have unique,
really
vibrations. Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
And they've also done some other testings recently where they're using dyes in the water to show that these high dilutions, they're not nothing. It's not just water. You put the dye in and you see the way that it swirls around in that water. The frequency of that original substance remains. It
That's
transfers
so
across. So whilst you have diluted it that many times, so it's not toxic anymore, belladonna would actually be toxic in a crude dose. But diluted and succussed, you have all of that energy, all of that power, no toxicity, no overwhelming the liver, no side effects that could be,
bananas. Belladonna is a funny one. I forget. I looked it up at one point, the way that it's classified when it's used as a drug, but they used to use that to detox alcoholics.
Interesting.
Back in the, I guess in the 20s and 30s. Yeah.
Yeah.
The founder or the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous actually was in they call it like a drying out place, but it's basically like an early version of a detox center or rehab. And there'd be a wing of a hospital that was just for drunks, right?
Yeah.
And they gave him this belladonna sort of cocktail, and he tripped balls, like
massively.
He got high and had like a spiritual experience that ultimately, in part, led to the creation of that whole movement.
Wow, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
I have a book.
So belladonna is like at the root
of that.
Speaking of like, it wasn't a homeopathic dose, but like a plant that would normally be poison in the way that it was prepared.
Yes.
The kind of net result of that is millions upon millions of people surviving something they would have probably succumbed to in some form of addiction.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've got a book and it's called The Faces of Homeopathy, and it's one of the most detailed history books about who were the greats and what was the journey of homeopathy over the years. And the founders of AA are listed in there. They have, I'll have to find it and I'll send it to you, but they had something to do with homeopathy themselves.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
You know what's interesting too with the remedy belladonna, where you're talking about that trip, right? And the full on, when you are using belladonna, we use it with a lot of children's cases. It's a fever remedy because when you take the crude dose of belladonna, you would break out in a mad fever sweat, but the pupils dilate massively. People can get delirious. Kids can get very delirious.
Delirium. That's how they classify it. Yeah, because
Yep.
I was researching it to see if it was a hallucinogen. And it's not. It's a delirium. That's how they classify it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you are working with, and it can also cause like inflammatory processes like in the brain. So erratic behavior, can be quite big. And when we're working with kids, some of our complex kids these days, whether it's sort of like autism or pandas type things, some of these neuropsychiatric things, you give them belladonna. And because it's that same like cures like principle, right? You're giving belladonna to a child who is already in this delirious, they can get a bit violent, because there's so much inflammation in the body that they're striking out. They're not acting like themselves. And you see those symptoms resolve. So parents are like,
wow.
Their children might be having massive, sort of outbursts, and it just calms it completely. So yeah, it's one of our biggest remedies for those first stages of inflammation, but including in the brain. But yeah, delirium's big.
I can think of 2 people right now that I'm going to share that information with. Back to the water piece, like I said, I was going to ask you about Veda Austin if she'd done any of her, photography technique with this, but it makes a lot of sense that homeopathy is carried through water, right? Because now we're starting to learn, those of us like myself that are obsessed with water, that water is this amazing conduit of data, right? It has its own, not only carries information, but I think based on Veda's work that it actually has its own intelligence.
Yeah.
Like it's its own thing. We have no clue what it really is. Like, you just think, oh, water, it's this wet stuff. It's like, oh man, no, water is a whole trip. But it would make sense that if you're making your remedies with, especially probably with structured water and really water that already is very high vibrational, that it makes perfect sense that that would be the carrier.
Yep.
Right? Because the water is going to go, oh, information, I know what to do with this. And then all of a sudden you have, like I have a little jar of this stuff I made out of your remedies. I put 5 or 6 of them in there and, I sip on it at my desk. I've been on it about 2 weeks now, I think. Some days I forget because I keep the jar closed and it's kind of behind my monitor. And today I was like, oh man, I got to put it somewhere where I can see it. But like, I think of water as medicine on its own. So it makes perfect sense that like infusing it with more information is going to create some really powerful water that can be more targeted than just like, oh, this is a really high vibrational water and it's going to hydrate me. It's like we're giving the cells and all of the kind of data receivers in the body something to really work with.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
That's so interesting.
If you're a fan of this show, you likely have some knowledge of the concept of quantum energy. We've covered it a lot over the past few years. Put simply, quantum energy is the source energy that exists in literally everything. Every one of us constantly interacts with the quantum energy fields around us. What sucks, though, is that your energy field can be greatly disrupted by environmental toxicity and chaotic energy created by EMF. Well, thankfully, the innovative folks over at Lila Quantum develop products to strengthen and protect our biofield and even mitigate harmful EMF. But let's be real here. Anyone can make claims about quantum energy products because this energy is, by its very nature, invisible and therefore difficult to prove. What can be proven, though, is whether or not a quantum energy product has a positive impact on the body. To solve this, Lila Q provides a grip of randomized, placebo-controlled single and double-blind studies proving the many benefits of their products. Of the various studies listed on their site, the dark field microscopy studies are some of the most intriguing. These studies demonstrate significant protective and improvement effects of the quantum block technology on human blood following only a 10-minute exposure. To feel the effects of quantum energy yourself, here's what you do. Go to LilaQ.com and use the code Luke10 to get 10% off your first order. That's LEELAQ, LilaQ.com.
Let's talk about some of the use cases. I know you've done some work around fertility. You've mentioned a couple of other issues. Let's maybe start with fertility. I think that's something that's top of mind for many people, myself included.
Yeah.
In the past few years, many people struggle with that for a number of different reasons. And that could be really helpful to people listening?
Yeah. So I actually started my practice in fertility, and I just thought, okay, I wanted something where I had a clear end goal with every patient. And I started with using this fertility protocol, and it was wonderful. So you always still take the case of the couple in front of you because everybody is unique and their blocks to fertility are all individual, but you do see a lot of common, underlying factors. So I would take the case, and common things that we would see is, a history of birth control or any of those sort of contraceptive things that people have used. So you'd want to look at that, and you can use homeopathy to detox that and get the periods back to sort of their perfect sync and cycle. And then you also want to look at other things like example, a common one for women, a profile that I saw a lot of the time was this remedy carcinosin. And they can be the more really high achieving sort of people, high performing. They can put a lot of pressure on themselves. And oftentimes they grew up in a household where maybe they were a bit anxious, their nervous system's dysregulated, whether dad was an alcoholic or the parents were fighting. They sort of developed these coping mechanisms, and that was, I'm just going to keep everything perfect. I'm going to be perfect. And it's very stressful on their internal biology. And as they get older, they have these sort of sets of symptoms that are quite common. So, like mono, what you guys would term that over here, we call glandular fever, but the EBV, that sort of getting floored by something like that, or dealing with chronic fatigue, gut issues, gut sensitivities. And it's like their whole immune system is sort of on high alert. And when these women would come into my practice, by giving them that remedy, the amount of physical healing that they would go through, it's like their body had been so burdened by just everything, that they were going through, and that trying to be perfect and hold it and do it all right. Their changes, yes, they would have the physical return of old symptoms. So they would email me the next week and say, oh my gosh, when I started taking that remedy, I felt like I was going to get mono again. Like my tonsils, like all my glands all swelled up, and I was like, not well. It's like, great. Again, the remedy is finding the source of that disturbance and turfing it out. And they'll often be quite emotional, purging a lot of that old grief and the things that they've not processed since they were children. And yeah, then, their gut health gets better, their periods change. So it's very individual, but there are a lot of women who I believe their body's actually lacking that vital energy, and that remedy is the stimulus to kickstart it again. Another remedy that I've used a lot is for people more prone to that sort of autoimmune-ish, sort of look of things, whether it's like Hashimoto's, like their thyroid, rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of that, recurrent miscarriages sometimes. And it's that the body, and it's just that distortion of energy coming down their family lines. We always look at their parents' health and their grandparents' health, because that is very insightful to us as homeopaths about what distortions might have been handed down that have nothing to do with the couple in front of me. And this is something that homeopathy can offer that most modalities can't touch. And that, essence, right? We call it miasms. Are you familiar with miasms?
I've only from listening to one of your interviews.
Yeah. And so the essence of that, if I explain it to you simply, is really, if your mother had tuberculosis, right? And the lungs were severely affected, but then she got medical treatment and it got rid of the tuberculosis per se. And so it's healed. She doesn't have tuberculosis, but then she has a child. That child is much more likely to be under the influence of the tubercular miasm and be prone to things like asthma, allergies. It's this sensitivity because the distorted energy of mum's lungs was not truly healed, not from the inside out. It was drugged to sort of suppress that disease process, but the distortion of energy remains. So that's what we see coming down family lines. So let's say if mum or dad even had things like STDs, and the resonance of the energy in the reproductive organs is not right, we can actually address that with our patients, to undo the issues of the ancestors. So we always look at that. And, with our carcinosin patients, often there is a strong family history of cancer that runs, and it's just that energetic blueprint. Again, we're not big into genetics. It's the energetics that was passed on that we need to recalibrate for them. So it's a big part of working in fertility, is clearing the baggage that we've come through with. So that's big. We do like good hormone, like recalibrating. So for men, we can just look at when we give their body that homeopathic testosterone, it's not like you're taking a crude dose of it and you're forcing your body into submission and possibly throwing things out of balance. When you mirror up the energy of that testosterone remedy, their body, the divine blueprint, that vital force within them, either knows that it does need a kick up the butt and it will produce more. And so I will have men do a sperm analysis, get all of their levels tested, and then get things checked, 4 or 5 months later. And by even just simple things like that, huge improvements.
Really?
Yes. In their testosterone.
That's crazy.
Like some of my greatest ones, it would be men whose sperm counts have quadrupled in 4 months. And it's just through 1 or 2 homeopathic remedies. And that is the only thing that they have changed in that 4 months. Massive. Wow. Because you think when you stimulate the vital force of a man, and all of the energy, it just lights up your energy like a Christmas tree. Of course, the sperm, the testosterone, all of the hormones, everything gets into alignment a lot quicker. So,
when I got your products from Remedy, I have this little suitcase right here, which actually I'll just open it up right now for people that are watching. So super cool. At first, I thought it was like essential oil.
Yes, that's a big thing people think.
So for those watching on the video, we've got a case here with, I don't know how many, a couple 30 different remedies. But then there was also 2 bottles in the package. One, I think, was like a female hormone one, and one was a male hormone. But they were...
Oh, yes, for him and for her.
Yeah. In a little dropper bottles. And from what I recall on the instructions for those, it was just like a couple drops under the tongue. And it feels like it has a little alcohol in that one. Yeah. Where these, you actually make your preparation with water and you shake it up and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is the one that I have, the testosterone one, this is a selfish question.
Yes. It does have that in it. And you know what's interesting?
Because I've never liked the idea of taking testosterone. I haven't checked mine in a while, but it's just like, I don't want to signal my body to be like, we're done making that, and become dependent on something.
One of our students at the moment in our academy, she's working with a couple using the same fertility protocol, but using that same remedy for him. And it's a gentleman who has 0 healthy sperm. He's sort of got like an underlying issue, which means he has 0 healthy sperm. And from just taking that remedy, he has a couple of weeks later, his, ejaculation completely changed. Like from what would just be usually just watery, now really cloudy, and all of these physiological changes just from that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a powerful remedy.
I'm getting on it.
Yeah.
I've done it a few times, but I haven't been that consistent.
No, and the for her one that you're talking about, that's the folliculinum, that estrogen one that I was explaining.
Oh, cool.
Where, it really, that would be one of the number 1 fertility remedies for women when it's a hormonal disturbance. But it's different for everybody. But like another thing that we have to look at in our consults is the issues from vaccines. And this is one thing that, might blow your mind, but with the vaccines that we've had, even, say 20 years ago. So I've had some women who had severely adverse reactions to the Gardasil. And so that's your HPV vaccine that people get during high school. Well, I was making up the remedy for them to trigger that detox response in their body. I thought to myself, like, I did get that vaccine when I was at school, even though, as far as I know, I've not had issues from it. I was like, I may as well just take a dose and just, whatever. And this was maybe 3 years ago. And I took that remedy. The next morning I woke up and I was pulling on my nightgown And I was like, oh my gosh. And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, my arm, it feels like I've just had and I was like, no way. My arm was fully dead in that exact injection point that you would put a vaccine into. And I was so shocked. I was like, no. And I'm going over the day before thinking, what could I have possibly done to just pull this one little muscle in that, my arm? And I reached out to somebody who specializes in that area. And he's saying, it's not uncommon given the nature of that Gardasil vaccine actually with paralysis that it caused for a lot of people. And I called my sister and I was like, I've just had this. And she said, don't you remember how dead our arms were when we got that vaccine at school? I was like, I do not remember that at all. And it's so powerful. And my period changed from that point. It just like dragged out, but something hormonally changed that month that I did that detox. So a lot of people, I was consulting through COVID and a lot of people had changes to their menstrual cycle over the last couple of years.
If they didn't die first, yeah.
Detoxing that has been
not to be crass, but
huge. Yeah. And detoxing for those people, I worked with a lot of nurses from the US in that time, a lot of people from Australia. And when they took their homeopathic detox remedies for that specifically, they were passing massive clots. And then a lot of them were able to get pregnant after that.
Whoa.
So the body, and again, in its own divine intelligence, knows what it needs to get out, what it needs to shed. And a lot of these women being nurses, they know what's normal. They're not too frightened, but they're saying these clots were like as big as my fist. I've never had anything like it in my life. And it was during those detox remedies that passed out. And it was only 1 month that they usually had that happening. And then after the hormones were back in sync, the body was happy again, but powerful. And, when we look at the issues associated with vaccines, there's a lot of complex children who are getting helped with homeopathy massively. I mean, that's going to be another reason that homeopathy is becoming so famous again now, because it is the solution to a lot of problems that modern medicine has created, because we can undo a lot of that damage with the vibration of what caused the original assault. So another nurse.
It's crazy too with, like what you're describing with vaccine injuries, because, and I'm no expert on vaccines because I've just never believed in them ever, even before any of this COVID stuff. But but the basic idea there, it sounds similar to homeopathy, right? Where you're introducing, the poison to the body essentially to build immunity toward the disease, which never made sense to me. But is it not kind of a similar?
Yeah, it is a similar premise. Yeah, definitely.
But one works and one kills you.
Yeah, well, one's toxic and one is just using the energy to protect your field.
Okay.
So where homeoprophylaxis...
I wonder if that's where the vaccine industry, maybe they stole the idea from homeopathy, homeopathy, and just kind of did it the wrong way.
Yeah, homeopathy had it, I guess, really quite early because it was in Samuel Hahnemann's day. He was treating a little girl for a red, swollen, throbbing thumb, and she had an injury there. And the remedy was belladonna that he was giving her to protect, to heal the thumb. And what he noticed at that time, scarlet fever was rampant, and it went through her whole house and everyone died but her. And he was like, why did she? And he was like, she was on belladonna. And then he went through and then he started to come to this idea of, because belladonna is the remedy that you would use for scarlet fever, maybe giving it beforehand actually gives her field protection, and it passed her over completely. And so then they started using it. And yes, homeopathy, belladonna for scarlet fever, it's to this day. We were watching a documentary. There's a documentary out at the moment called Introducing Homeopathy, and they were interviewing this homeopath.
Was it well done? Like, did you?
It's pretty well done.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I really loved it. I think it's a great.
We'll put it in the show notes, which by the way will be lukestorey.com/RMDY remedy. lukestorey.com/remedy. So anything and everything we've talked about today, including links to your site and a discount code and all that, will be in the show notes.
Amazing. And they look at this Romanian doctor who over there, and he's seeing, I can't remember exactly, but he might be seeing 40 patients a day, right? He's a busy homeopathic doctor. And yeah, to this day, you still use belladonna. It shows him using that for scarlet fever. And yeah, so that preventative, looking after your field first so that you're not susceptible to any of these things, because it is a vibrational root. What whatever is able to sort of come into our body. A lot of the time, there is a vibrational susceptibility. It's why some people, manifest symptoms and some don't. But they can be external things that, can trigger responses in us. It's not just if you have a perfect vibration, you'll be completely, perfectly secured for all time.
I've learned that the hard way, thinking, man, I do all of these things to support my health. And then still every couple of years I get a flu or something. I'm like, what? Me? I'm like almost insulted, I'm like, well, I thought I was above this, no, you're still made of protoplasm, we're all susceptible to some degree.
And the flu is like, it's your body working perfectly to just trigger off a little like detox here. To the homeopath, we would be very concerned if someone come to us and they said, I've not been sick in like 15 years. And I would think, not even as much as a cold. And they say no. I say, oh dear.
Really?
I would internally, I would not say that to them. But I would be thinking, what is going on with your energy that you can't mount a basic, immune response such as a fever or a bit of a flu to get like a bit of a trigger detox. It's a funny one. It's a balancing act because definitely you can get yourself to a point of robustness where like, yes, you are very well. Do you know Wayne Dyer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I loved him when I was young.
I interviewed his daughter a couple of years ago.
No way.
Yeah.
I loved him. He's so gorgeous. And I saw in an interview not that long ago, but he was telling the show host, I've not had, as much as a sniffle in like 10 years or something. And it wasn't much longer after that he found out he had leukemia.
Oh, wow.
And it's like that the body, the energy is absorbed in something, another process. And it's sort of why, I'm pretty sure in the mental hospitals, they'll say things like schizophrenic patients are often actually constitutionally very robust. They're not often susceptible to the usual gastro, sort of things that might, you might think people are susceptible to, but it's that the disturbance in their field is in a completely different area, that they're not manifesting the symptoms. Sometimes even people taking heaps of drugs or deep in alcoholism, and you would think that they should be so sick all the time, right? And they seem indestructible, but it's that the distortion of energy in their field is completely absorbed in another area. So when they stop doing those things, then they might get back to having colds and flus and stuff like that.
I experienced that personally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, pretty close to that. I probably don't need to tell you if you're a regular listener of this show, but EMF radiation is a silent killer. It leads to oxidative stress and depletes and weakens our cells. So if you're exposed to EMF on the daily, which is everyone, you need to take action to resupply your body with what it needs to protect you. And that, my friends, is simply minerals. Turns out minerals are some of the best natural protection from EMF damage, so it's critical to supplement. I mean, imagine if you could give your body all the minerals it needs to fortify your inner resilience in just 30 seconds a day. Well, thankfully, that's totally possible, ridiculously easy, and affordable. You just throw back a shot of Beam minerals every morning, and you're good to go. The full spectrum of minerals in Beam acts like a shield guarding against the stress caused by EMF. So if you want extra EMF support from the inside out, you got to get on the Beam, my friends. To do it, just visit beamminerals.com and use the code Luke to get 20% off. And with Beam, you'll get all 12 minerals your body needs in bioavailable form, which means you're not going to be spending your hard-earned money on expensive pee. And what's cool is that Beam not only protects you from EMF, but it also supports heavy metal detox, better mood, energy, and sleep. The fact is that everything just works better when you are fully mineralized. And again, you can do it at beamminerals.com with the code Luke. Speaking of which, what's the relationship with homeopathy and addiction and alcoholism and things like that? Is there any precedence for it helping people overcome those issues?
Definitely. And I mean, we want to look at the roots of, like, I've worked with a lot of people who have had any sort of addiction, right? And I mean, it can even be a gym addiction. It can be like a food addiction. Of course, drugs, alcohol are the common ones we like to demonize, but people are addicted to all sorts of things, definitely porn and all of that comes into it. And we just want to look at the roots of where does this come from? Because usually it's a vibrational loop that we're just playing out and then we get stuck in and we can recalibrate that. But there's certainly miasms where you will see a tendency towards addiction. And if you look up the family lines, usually, so in the syphilitic miasm specifically is probably one of our biggest ones for addiction, and more the hardcore addictions that are borderline self-destructive. And if I was to paint you a picture of the syphilitic miasm, we're looking at things like these people, it's like the light and the dark, right? That real duality. They can be super spiritual because the veil between worlds for these people often seems very thin. So they might be really prone to being like very intuitive, very creative, like they can just channel something in from another world, you know? And so they have that divine aspect, but then can be very prone to the flip side of that darkness and that craving alcohol, drugs, self-destructive. You see that in a lot of, you know, creative, you know, people, a lot of famous, like our rock stars. You see this divinity, but you can often see the underbelly of like what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. And so addressing that syphilitic miasm, like, it goes a long way towards breaking those chains of addiction, but then also honing in on what personally have they experienced that has led them to want to use those things to numb out, you know, why that adaptation. So yeah, depending on the nature of the original trauma. So let's say when I work with gentlemen who maybe have like a porn addiction or a severe drug addiction, and if they say, let's say in their earlier life, they were exposed to like sexual things like really early, and it unleashed in their mind this sort of like shame feeling, that sensation of shame, which has kept them locked in this cycle. And then their mind has sort of gone, you know, even more wayward with it. But it's all just around the shame, you know, that has then fed this self-loathing that then has fed into their desire for drugs to block out those sensations, you know. So the remedies specifically for that, it would be different to syphilinum, say. It might be like more like a remedy like Thuya. And it's like, yeah, those sorts of things. So you want it to be targeted versus maybe the guy who his dad always made him feel inadequate, like he never felt man enough, has all of these fears of failure, so he never starts anything. So he feels, you know, all of these sorts of sensations. And that's what drives his addictions, you know, is this whole feeling of like, I'm never good enough. I'm never going to be good enough, and just feeling trapped. And so he tries to escape with, you know, it's sort of endless. So we do have a lot of homeopathic remedies. We probably have maybe 60 that we use day in, day out in clinic, that you could sort of have a consult with someone and you could find one of those 60 would fit them very well. But we really do have like 6,000 remedies that exist. Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. But really the well-documented, really studied ones, like they're the ones that change lives.
It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, a patient's success would be largely based on kind of the skills of the practitioner, of the homeopathic doctor, right? Because you're going into these psycho-spiritual kind of root causes of the root cause, not just, oh, eczema, yeah, you probably ate something off. You know, it's like we're going multi-generational and into these other realms. It seems like the practitioner would have to be pretty tapped into just understanding the human condition and what we're all kind of doing here.
You see,
just do results vary a lot based on the level of expertise of the practitioner if they kind of get it wrong or
because
don't ask the right questions in your intake and they're not digging that deeply, that you might have a lesser result?
If you give the incorrect homeopathic remedy, right, the wrong vibration, and it does not match the patient at all, we get none of the like cures like curative reaction. That frequency will do nothing really to you. So that's when people would take a remedy and say, oh, homeopathy, they discard it and say, oh, it does nothing, because they didn't have that distortion of energy. So it really did nothing. You want it to be targeted.
But it doesn't do harm. So say if it's the wrong remedy for someone, it's not going to have an adverse sort of effect, just no effect.
And especially not if you take it like a couple of times. You wouldn't want to take a remedy for no reason for years on end, like a multivitamin, you know, because you don't want to expose your field to something over and over and over again that it doesn't need, you know. But generally, no, it does nothing. So the expertise, I guess, of the homeopath, one beautiful thing, even though we do like to know about like the history of traumas and their experiences and just what goes on truthfully inside their head, if you can build enough rapport and like, you know, a safe place with your patient that they can really tell you the bizarre things, you know, because we all as human beings, we have our own individual quirks and things, and usually
we're weird.
Yeah, we are weird. And it's something that
and everyone, we subjectively think that we're weirder than anyone, you know, back to that shame, right? There's like that background noise of shame that's like, oh, no one else has had the experiences I've had, or think about the perverse things that I think about. And it's like,
and that is the beauty. What I love about homeopathy is when people read cases or they read about a remedy, and when they read through that remedy and they feel so seen, they think, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only person who felt like this. And as a homeopath, I really just try to, and I talk about a lot online, it's like we're all just adapting in our own different ways. We've got unique lives and experiences, and nothing that you say to me is ever going to be too much information. Tell me anything that you're comfortable with telling me. And that openness, you know, and Peter, the original homeopath that saw my sister, then myself, we now work together teaching homeopathy. But he says to people, it's your secrets, you know, that really keep you unwell. And if we can create a safe space enough that you can tell us, you know, and we shine a light on that darkness, that thing that you really want to hide, that's usually key to finding the best homeopathic remedy for you. It's the thing that you least want to tell me.
We all have those things.
Yeah, we all have those things. Yeah. And it's like, you're not as unique as you think you are. You know, if you take enough cases as a homeopath, you realize we've all got our different like picks of issues, but the patterns, you know, often repeat, and often it's based off what we experienced, you know, as children. Plus you tie in our own individual makeup, you know, what we're here, you know, we're all just so different. But yeah, it is a skill, and finding that right remedy. Sometimes you won't nail it until the 6th prescription, right? Like I might have done 6 consults with someone back and forward, and I'm like, my gosh, what am I missing? There's something critical I'm missing here. And it might be in the 6th consult, and they say something to me and it just goes, bing, I know now. I know what you need. And I think that for me is so confirming with homeopathy about how far beyond a placebo we are. Because, you know, my dad, obviously as a doctor, he's asked me, he thinks sometimes he's like, no, being in your energy and you actually listening to people for the first time, he's like, that's what is their biggest catalyst to healing. That's what all of their testimonies are about. But I'm like, Dad, you should see the number of times that I've gotten it wrong. And it's not until I nail it. And I know usually when I found it, I go, hey, here it is. But massive, you know, rapid healing after that. So, you know, when you work with babies who don't know even the process of what's going on, they can be screaming with colic. Maybe they're 6 weeks old and they're drawing their legs up. They're in so much pain and the parents are absolutely distressed out of their mind. And they put that one little drop of colosynthis under the tongue and they watch that baby relax within 30 seconds. And they just will think, what have I just seen? Months that child has been screaming. And, you know, these sorts of things, you know, when we were talking about the syphilitic miasm and I was talking about the duality of the light and the dark, we've got a lot of kids who are experiencing things like night terrors, right? Like at night, really bad dreams, maybe even like growing pains, stuff like that you see in syphilinum. And these kids who have woken up screaming every night for the last 2 years, and I ask the parents to give them a dose of this remedy, and then it's the first time they've slept through the night, and then the next night, and the next night, and the parents are like, oh my gosh, because the child has no idea what they're taking those drops under the tongue for.
Yeah, they're placebo proof.
Yeah,
I do stuff with our dog Cookie like that. I'm
to
like,
see
what'll happen.
On the dog.
Yeah, just like try some supplement that's appropriate for her or something. And it's like I know there's no placebo, so I know if it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like CBD is a good one because I've taken a lot of CBD products over the years. I'm like, I don't feel anything, you know, give her some CBD like she's out for 4 hours. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, okay, it does something. Her nervous system went, you know, like when we fly with her, we'll give her some of that. I'm like, sure enough, she doesn't know what she's taking. You know, she thinks it's a piece of meat, you know?
Yeah.
And I've laced it with some weed.
I love it. We've also got people experimenting with homeopathics on, like their organic elderberry farm, and they're using arnica when they repot. Because you imagine how traumatic, right? The injury is of being reefed up, dug out, replanted.
I always apologize. As you can tell from my home, I'm really big on plants, but when I have to repot them and stuff, I learned this from my wife because she's more tapped in than me generally like this, but I always apologize to them and explain what I'm doing. Or when I go to trim dead leaves, I'm like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. We cool? Ask the permission. I mean, it might sound crazy to someone, but it makes me feel good if nothing else.
No, totally.
But it is. I mean, imagine like you're rooted up from your house, and someone's like, "Oh, cool, you're in Pakistan now." It's like, wait, what? What happened? I didn't agree to this.
Yeah, no, 100%. And using arnica on them, their roots. You look at their root systems of the ones who had the arnica versus the ones that didn't. And it is a huge difference.
Really?
So, yeah, definitely. So in horticulture, like homeopathy is becoming like quite big, obviously, as like a natural.
I want to do that.
I'm
going to
totally
try that
start to experiment.
My big thing right now is I like rescuing cacti that I find around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's like a house a block away, and I don't know, they just like cut a bunch out of their yard and threw it in the bushes.
Mm-hmm.
I walk by and I'm like, I would like to have more cactus in the yard and stuff, And then I saw one of them had a little sprout on it. I thought they were just dead. And I was like, dude, it's trying to come back to life, So I have them like potted out in the yard. And cactus, for anyone that doesn't know, or cacti, I guess, they grow very slowly. It's not like reviving a normal like green leafed plant. So it takes a while, but they're starting to come to life. And I'm like, what could I give them that would really, fortify them? So I want to try that.
Yes, totally try it.
Is arnica specifically like the one that's good for
the trauma? I think a lot of the times that would be a good one. Depending on what the poor little cacti's been through.
Yeah. The ones I'm talking about they were pretty beat down. I mean, they weren't going to make it if I didn't save them.
Yeah. And then you've also got it being used in a lot of like vet sort of situations. So, you should try it for Cookie for sure.
Yeah, she's got a real breathing issue now. Yeah. The air here in Texas has not been good to her.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely in animals. They use it in like sort of mass, like farms for cows with mastitis, very easy to resolve. And they just put the homeopathics in their trough, in their water. They lap it up. Their body recognizes that and it just resolves the mastitis. Yeah, huge. A lot of racehorses, they use them in their water, usually before the races to keep them calm at the gates because obviously they ride better when they're not like a bit hysterical. Yeah. So, but using it on animals, it's very easy to see the effects.
When it comes to, say, someone who's listening and they're, this sounds exciting, I want to give this a try. What's the difference between, choose your own adventure and someone goes on your site and is like, oh, I get ear infections. Like, I'm going to pick that one and start using that remedy versus booking a consult with a practitioner and really dialing it in more. I mean, is it something that people can just kind of like wing and figure out on their own and have success with? Or do you really need to work with someone who knows what they're doing to guide your journey?
Yeah. If you want to do the chronic stuff, like your deeper mental and emotional purging, physical recalibration of the chronic issues. So say if you had endometriosis, chronic migraines, something that is really frequent, definitely working with a practitioner is the most powerful way to go. A lot of people accidentally stumble on the right remedy and heal themselves and it's just remarkable. But the majority of the time, the guidance of the practitioner is invaluable. But when you're looking at things in the home, the biggest converter of families to homeopathic medicine is chamomilla, the teething remedy, because their kids have been irritable and cranky and, all of things when they're teething. And then they give them the chamomilla and all of a sudden the child is like, just a new child. So those sort of basic acute things, a fever, a cold, anything that you just want to support them through, an ear infection, if it's a once off. But if someone says to me, like, I have chronic ear problems and I actually get an ear infection every year, that's deeper. So you want to work with a practitioner to resolve that. But I definitely think everybody benefits from having a kit in their home for just the random times when something happens. Like, obviously, we're traveling all across the US at the moment and we've got a big team here with us. We've got 12 of us. And one of us, not naming names, Stephen, but when he landed, he had a major flare-up of tendinitis, like so painful, almost like plantar fasciitis level. And like He couldn't walk. He was shaking in pain. And this guy like never has an issue. And so you can imagine like just as we land and he's like, oh my gosh, no, like this would be so bad. And we used homeopathics and it was the most rapid turnaround. And he was shook by the power of it.
Wow.
And so, and we went to Bali for a conference last year and like the team, things like if someone has like a bit of an upset stomach from something they've eaten, it's like you want to have it there for those times of just gentle support. And definitely as families, if you've got young kids, if you raise them using homeopathy, which only supports that healing vitality from the inside out, there is no suppression, right? Even when you give belladonna for a fever, what you're going to find is it's not necessarily going to wipe out that fever because that fever is productive. That is the healing response. But you find the delirious, fevering child who's uncomfortable or their head's throbbing and they're in pain. You give them the belladonna and then they just fall asleep and they like restore like that.
Wow.
So you definitely want a kit for the random things.
Right. So you have like your first aid kit, which I mean, this was essentially like a first aid kit. But then if it's something that's ongoing, chronic, has deeper roots, you'd want to like get a little more in depth.
Because no two situations are the same, you look at fertility and yes, we could reduce it to an extent to a protocol, which was wonderfully successful. When I started my practice, I actually did a trial, 2 groups of 6, and I did it publicly and sort of let people come in. And I had, out of those 12, everybody conceived within 5 months. And that was like, I know. And I think that was like the good grace, like I guess, of kickstarting me into this obsessively passionate career where, it's been...
I mean, that's like having the power of God.
It felt like, if you ask my husband, every person who would message me, you're not going to believe this, I'm pregnant. And we celebrated, especially in that very beginning, we celebrated every single one. Like it was just, we had a meetup in Texas yesterday and one of the people who came to our community meetup, she had a baby in her arms and she's like, I was the last patient that you saw before you shut your doors and started your academy to teach people. And this is the baby that I had. And I was like, oh my gosh. And like I got to hold him and I don't normally see the babies, but it's beautiful, to work in that. But every fertility case, it is unique. So you can use certain remedies to really bolster fertility, but we must look at the individual. If that woman experienced sexual abuse when she was younger, I need to clear that energy in her genitourinary, organs. Like it needs to be addressed. If there was any history of STDs, like in this one, it's like, I need to know that because I need to clear that. So very individual. So working with a practitioner, and there is a variance in the ways that homeopaths prescribe as well. So you really want to find someone where you are really seeing good results. I don't advise like shopping around because sometimes it takes the homeopath a little while to really see the essence of the case. Like how I was saying, sometimes it takes me till the 6th consult and then I'm like, hallelujah, here we go, and it's complete healing. But if you were working with someone for years on end, it's possible that their approach, or even like 6 months, but you're getting that vibe of I'm not seeing the movement that I need. Sometimes because as a homeopath, we're unique as well. Maybe you've just not found the right homeopath for you yet. And it's, you nail that remedy. We've got a student in our academy and she's had her son with complex needs under the care of a homeopath for 20 months. But during the course of learning, she was learning about this remedy Thuya, and she thought, you know what, I just really feel like this is going to fit. And in a specific potency that we use, we like the Fibonacci homochords. In our course, we teach about them. I love them. And it's combining different strengths of that same remedy into one bottle and letting the person's individual vital force decide how strong, like what frequency do I need as an individual. So I love that. And she gave that to her son, the Thuya in the Fibonacci homochord. That night, he ran a massive fever immediately. 2 days after that, he was vomiting like a gastro bug. He was vomiting and maybe even diarrhea as well. At the end of the week, he had a bunch of warts break out onto his skin. And she said after that, am looking at a completely transformed child. All of the sensory things,
That's
all
crazy.
of the aggression, the hitting, the everything. Right. And she's obviously ecstatic.
I'm so annoyed with why am I just learning this now? It's just crazy. That happens every now and again. You know, I'm like so blown away by something. I go, why didn't I go? Well, I was on to something else. I wasn't meant to know about it then. I guess you know, sometimes
perfect timing.
Sometimes these things come to you when you know, when they're most appropriate and you're open to them. You know, because as you're speaking, of course, I'm thinking of friends that have kids and thinking of myself and my wife and our dog and like, oh man, I got to try this. I got to try that. One thing that comes to mind there, you were speaking about air travel. And one of the things that's difficult for many of us with air travel is just the really high EMF, right? And EMF is something that I really educate a lot on because I'm very passionate about helping people understand it and mitigate it. Have you looked into any remedies that would help people that are highly sensitive to EMFs be more resilient?
That's
part one. Part two is I had this idea actually within the last couple of days. I was talking to some guys yesterday who do EMF mitigation as part of what they do, and they discovered that shungite is a really great harmonizer. It's a mineral, right? And it's a great harmonizer of radiation. And I was thinking as they were talking, I thought, man, I wonder if you could make a homeopathic remedy with the signal of shungite and take that and have essentially an internal resiliency. Is anything like that make sense in your reality?
I would imagine if you emailed like the pharmacy, if I emailed and I said, do you have shungite in a homeopathic remedy? They probably do. But there are, so you can go that way and use that, and that could be powerful. You'd have to test it, you know, and have your ways of knowing, you know.
Sleep with your cell phone under your pillow with it turned on. See how you feel in the morning.
Yep. But the other ways is like when you actually take the case of someone, we have homeopathic remedies because there are people who are super sensitive and they can feel it. You know, they walk in a room and when you use the homeopathic remedies, it's like it bolsters and protects their body from it anyway. You know, those sort of more ethereal sort of people who, you know, the boundaries between like their body and the energy, all of that is not as strong. So yeah, you know, you can go either way, like trying to use one. And we've got remedies like, you know, radiation, you know, so some people will take them to sort of protect and mitigate against certain, if they're going in for an x-ray, for example, you might use the remedy x-ray and trigger like a bit of a detox. There's a bit of a famous homeopath, her name's Anka Zimmerman, uses the remedy ultrasound for a lot of her complex needs children who had a lot of ultrasounds during in utero. Incredible results.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, I have interviewed a few doulas and things like that over the years that have spoken to the risks of ultrasounds, but that's one of those things I'm just like, why are we still doing this?
Yeah.
I wrote about it a bit in my book because I believe it's one of the sources of our earliest trauma, you know, is the radiation and the sound that not infant yet, embryo, I guess they're called before they come out.
Yeah.
That they're subjected to. You know, that's a gnarly one. That's cool. How interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about your training. So you have this institute now. Obviously, I mean, I've interviewed a number of people like you that develop an area of expertise and they work one-on-one with clients and see great results with whatever modality they have. And then at a certain point, they want to share that and train other people, and they're not scalable because they're only one person. I'm assuming you've arrived at that place where like you're not doing one-on-one consults anymore and you realize like, hey, I'm not the only one that can do this. So you decided to start training other people?
Yeah. And it was really that revelation of, I was booked out, 6 months in advance. And I just didn't want people, especially in fertility, having to wait that long. And it's like, it's learnable. And it's so, we need so many more homeopaths in the world. You guys have 1 million, over 1 million medical doctors in the US. And obviously my goal is to get as many homeopaths back and really well-trained, like really seeing results. Because a lot of people, you know, when they come across homeopathy, they do think that it is those surface level sort of acutes. I don't think they understand necessarily the depths of transformation and I guess alchemy that homeopathy triggers in people. So really making sure that people are really well trained. And Peter, that homeopath that originally looked after my sister, myself, now we run that academy together with an amazing, you know, Jean Duckworth from the UK. And it is just phenomenal. You know, we have in our academy the largest intake of students to be homeopaths in history.
Really?
Like never. I think homeopathy, after the post-COVID years, people have really woken up, not just to natural health, but also I think the metaphysical. I think we're seeing the end of the constant, you know, supplements and biohacking and like just to that nth degree where now it's like, you know how you were saying you've now come into this like real soulful place of like my higher purpose and like what I want to do. It's like that vibrational element, you know, even on Instagram for myself, you go through where it's like learning knowledge so much. But then a lot of people aren't thriving with all of that knowledge. And it's just becoming, like homeopathy seems to them, it's like, this is actually what I was looking for. I didn't want to take 10 supplements a day. I wanted to not have the distortion of energy to begin with. You know, I don't want to manage. I want to get to the root of my problems. You know, why is my nervous system so dysregulated? So I do get all these symptoms, you know? So it's the most root causey, you know, modality, in my opinion, because you're addressing also your lineage, you know, what comes down your family lines. A lot of people are dealing with symptoms that they shouldn't be. It's like, it's not to do with you. It's like your ancestors' energy. Let's get rid of that, you know, as much as possible.
So you have an actual like physical location in Australia?
So in Australia, we have our homeopathic centre for healing. So I'm not allowed to call it a homeopathic hospital, but that essentially is our goal, to reopen these in as many states as possible where people come into these clinics, experience homeopathy, get treated. I like to have a physical place, even though I have loved working online and it makes it limitless, you know, working with people in the Middle East or Lebanon or wherever has been amazing, but there's something to be said for having a place to go. I think when you're unwell and really see someone and actually buy the homeopathic remedies over the counter specifically for what you need at that time, you know, not buying them online and just doing your best, you know. I love the brick and mortar thing. So that is being constructed right now, our very first, you know, homeopathic center for healing, which I think will be extremely busy. So that'll be the really the first setup, and then I think they will explode like around the world. We've got a lot of American students who are just, you know, already asking like, where can we set up? What are we going to do? And because there's just so many people looking for homeopaths right now, there's a real shortage of homeopaths and treatment out there. So I think it's going to be huge. But we do a 2-year course, and that's where we teach all of the foundations. We teach those, like, say, 60 remedies inside out, back to front. But even though we do all of the classical stuff, you know, which is the foundations that Samuel Hahnemann put forward, we also have a lot of lecturers brought in who specialize in certain fields. So if you have worked in, working with autism and ADHD, all of that, pandas with kids for, 20 years, you have a lot of modern techniques because life has changed from 250 years ago. The layers that we're dealing with now are very different to what Samuel Hahnemann was experiencing. And so these modern homeopaths and these modern approaches, we incorporate into the academy to teach people all of the niches. So we've got a vet in there who teaches all about homeopathics for animals and how to use it because it's specialized. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a good point, though. It's like what would have been effective 200 years ago using homeopathy is probably changed now because you have like multi-generational nutritional deficiencies, for example, and the poisoning of the environment, the air, the food, the soil, all of the medication that everyone's been taking for however long they've been taking it. So yeah, we're at a point now where it's like probably need a little more.
Yeah. And there are some homeopaths who they really cling to, only one remedy at a time. That's what, typically back in the day would have been happening. But with these complex kids with fertility, I have seen it firsthand, the power of a layered approach, addressing the miasmatic stuff, the family stuff, at the same time doing the hormonal stuff, at the same time doing the detox stuff. It works like a symphony in the body. The body receives it. It knows what to do. It gets its instruction. And, it's just that modern approach, but yeah, really effective.
And to your point of people that aren't so inclined to take tons of supplements, I mean, it's like, I take all kinds of stuff just because I like to tinker and just play around, and probably because I used to take a lot of drugs. Just like I go to my medicine cabinet now, and they don't maybe get me high, but I'm like, I want to see what happens. How will I feel? And sometimes I feel good, sometimes not so much. I make errors and then help educate people on what not to do sometimes. But my wife, for example, is not someone who she hates taking pills and supplements and stuff like that. I think most people are probably like that. So it's difficult to habituate themselves into a regimen. So if you have a problem and you go to a functional medicine doctor and you do some testing, they're like, here's 150 pills you have to take every day.
Yeah.
It's not going to work for most people, especially if they don't have that proclivity. And, if they're really sick, that's also difficult to remember, right? It's like all this scheduling of what you take when and what's with food and what's not and what's at night and daytime. I mean, I know it's very overwhelming for some people. So I think one thing that's interesting, at least from what I'm understanding about homeopathy and like the remedy that I made for myself, which was just everything for your ears. I'm just like, I'll just see what happens. But it's so easy, right? It's like most people have a water bottle that they carry around anyway, right? I mean, is that the way that homeopathic medicine is taken most of the time? You would make like a preparation in water and just sip it throughout the day?
In the acutes, yes. So because you're going to take probably a couple of doses, throughout the day for an acute issue. For my fertility ones, I give people the bottle, like the for him and for her, where it's direct under the tongue, because I only want them to take one stimulation, because these remedies, they're not the acute ones. It's like, these ones are going deep. Like, we're going to feel some things when we take that. And so if somebody was to put carcinosin or syphilinum in their water bottle and then take like, say, 20 sips from that water bottle throughout the day, that's going to be a lot. And people, can feel a lot of stuff with that.
You feel like you have syphilis?
Not that, but it might just be like, oh my gosh, all of the issues of my ancestors, all of the anxieties, all of the, oh my gosh, like you can see it really come up hard and fast. So, you watch those.
That speaks to why for some people it'd be more appropriate to work with a practitioner, right?
Yeah, so definitely. So you can say, what the hell is happening, right? Because you think with me, with my, the cold sores coming up, I would never have known that something like that could be triggered by homeopathy. So if I'd never seen him again, I wouldn't know. You know what's funny? Okay, so I took that remedy for 3 weeks. All of those crazy things happened. And I'm probably quite like your wife. I'm sort of like, if it's not broke, like don't fix it. Just sit back. I don't take a lot of things. Even homeopathically, I've not done an awful lot of things. But recently, I saw someone have a wonderful experience with sulfur. And I thought, you know what? In that beginning period where I didn't really know much about homeopathy, like years and years ago, I only ever took it for like 3 weeks and then I just left it. And I don't think the real healing was completely done in that. And I started taking that more recently. Oh boy, if you can see on my hands, all of these red spots. So you think the nature of sulfur, it's that detox reaction, right? From that roaccutane that I took, my body needs to spin things out. Acne popped up like all over, but it's this red, I've got red spots.
Wow.
All over me coming out to the surface. And it's because sulfur it's like my remedy, sort of like constitutionally, a classical prescription. If you were to open up a homeopathic materia medica, so these are really thick books, and you can read all about what the sulfur person will sort of like look like, act like, what they'll crave. They often crave like sugar and caffeine, and they're often very philosophically minded, very much thinking about things up here. And, it's like they paint this massive picture. And that's in essence, very much when I read that, I was like, that really is the nature of like what I am like. And it shows you it like when they're really out of balance or when they're like, moderately out of balance. So when I started taking that remedy again, all these years later, here we have more detoxification, just a whole new layer. So it'll be interesting to see once I get through this. But it's like a lot of people may not be down for what it really takes to become well, like to be totally wholesomely, vibrantly well, because, the return of old symptoms can be really sucky for a period. When I'm working with, let's just say, a woman who experienced sexual abuse in her early life and she's had this suppressed bitterness and rage for the last 20 years, like she's always picking fights with her husband and it's like, she doesn't know how to control it. And then she takes this remedy and all of it just comes bubbling up and it's so painful and all of that she's then processing. You can see why a lot of people would say, I'd rather just leave Pandora's box just closed. Not everyone is here for getting to the root of issues. And that includes the physical because, when we are healing, a lot of the symptoms, they can be uncomfortable depending on the nature of how much suppression people have used and just their individual makeup, like what has happened for them. But it can be really rocky. And so working with a homeopath to just know and to celebrate, say for me, I'm quite unfazed by it. I'm like, oh yes, look at this response. Like my body is so brilliant. It's perfect. And, I might have a patient who, and the reason I was inspired to take it was another person who took sulfur and they had 8 cold sores break out. And when I was looking at their response, I was like, gosh, that is such powerful medicine. It's so incredible. But to them, having all these cold sores break out, most people don't celebrate, those sorts of things if they don't understand the beauty. And so, when I work with men and they take their remedies and then they're revisiting childhood grief, for men, that's profoundly uncomfortable for the great majority to be crying and to be feeling what they're feeling. And a lot of them will say to their wives, I do not want to take that. And the wife's like, oh, a lot of people are motivated when it's fertility. But healing and homeopathy, it's getting to the root. And whilst homeopathy cracks open the door for people to feel and experience and to detox, I do really believe that it's always the person choosing to walk through that door. Yes, it's been opened a new way, a new insight, but it's still always up to us whether we really want to pursue that level of healing and freedom. And I think that's what homeopathy for me is all about. It's breaking chains on anything in someone's life that is not allowing them to be completely free, to be who they are, to make the decisions that they want, to go after the job they want. Like we said, it's fulfilling that soul purpose. Anything that's blocking them is, I want to get out of the way with homeopathy.
I think there's a certain portion of the population in whatever incarnation they happen to arrive in that aren't interested in going all the way this time around.
Yeah.
It was confusing to me at some point, and then I would be judgmental at those people and call them muggles and NPCs, And then I think I had a humble moment and I was like, who knows how many lifetimes I was a muggle and just came here and just was a zombie and didn't work on myself and make any progress and just burn through lifetimes being an ogre. It's like, I'm sure it happened. It probably took who knows how many lifetimes for that to become painful enough where this time I came in and I was like, all right, enough of this shit. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I'm the person, I'll go through as many dark nights of the soul as I got to go through and however many reactions or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I know, each time I do that, what's on the other side of it is more freedom.
Yes.
But I think some people are just kind of wired to be complacent and learn how to be comfortable in their bondage.
Yeah.
Whatever that bondage looks like.
It's also
it's nice to actually just have compassion and be like, hey, each person is autonomous. And if you want to go through a lifetime and what appears to me as making zero progress, good on you.
Yeah.
It's none of my business. You know, I just know why I'm here.
Yeah. And it's such a beauty, I think, for the people who have had harder lives, like when they were younger, the beauty is that sort of cracks people open to, oh man, that is like so painful. And I'm so like, I'm just going to heal from this, versus the people who maybe are sort of just plodding through life of like, meh, it's okay. You know, it's good enough. I don't really care. But I don't know about you, but I feel like there's a massive group of people who are really now like on that page of, no, we actually want to do better. We actually want to raise our children, you know, not in that seen and not heard sort of vibe. Like it's a real different transformation on earth. And I think it's probably the earth is calling for it, because if we don't turn things around, like, I mean, if you even look at fertility, if we don't turn things around, we're in real trouble, like here on earth, like our future is. And so where the people who are here now are probably, they're different. A lot of them.
Yeah. Everyone I associate with it
is exactly. I know. I'm like, are we biased because we just hang out with a lot of this?
But then I go to an airport or the DMV or a grocery store and I'm like, oh no, shit, you know.
Wait, that's not the norm.
Everyone's not on board, you know. God bless them. It sounds like with your institute, you know, not calling it a hospital, I guess, because you can't, but I get the sense that you're not trying to integrate homeopathy into an existing system that's broken, but rather going, oh, cool, you guys just keep what you're doing over here. We're not fighting you. We're going to put a building over here and do our own thing and just start a parallel trajectory of something that you feel is more effective and more resonant with who you are and where you want to go.
We were really blessed. We were invited actually to sort of integrate into the area where we live. They said, we would love to have you in like the suites right next to these new hospitals they've just built so that we can cross-refer. And that's such a unique opportunity. But when we actually sat down and looked at what that would look like, it's like, man, I don't want to just be one little suite on some like elevator level of your hospital. I want to build my own huge healing center, and I want it to be sort of like separate and have a completely different vibe. And it is that our results speak for themselves. Like, I don't need those referrals. I know that this healing center will be so huge, so successful, because when people get the results, right, their child who had eczema, it's like completely healed. They tell 10 people, you know, every time they bump into someone whose child has eczema, they say, do you know where you should go, what you should check out? And so just that flow on effect is so huge. But to have in that area, even that opportunity where they said, like, we would love to have you here, I thought that was so interesting, you know, in the times that we are in. My sister was in the meeting when we were with them, and she said, do you not see or expect any hostility towards us as homeopaths in such a medically dominated? And the guy said no. And he's like, don't even think about that. And he said, I actually know one of the neurosurgeons at the hospital, and his child had a severe issue, and he tried everything that medicine had to offer. And he even tried a lot of natural things. And ultimately it was homeopathy that healed. And so this is a neurosurgeon in that hospital. He said, I think you'll be welcomed. But the big thing there is that in that area, there's a high percentage of Indian doctors, and homeopathy in India is absolutely huge.
Oh,
very respected in India. It's like a 6-year degree in a lot of Indian places. Yeah, they ticked like a Bachelor of Medicine, because a lot of their hospitals in India only use homeopathy to this day. So millions of people are reliant on homeopathy only as their form of medicine. So in that area, you know, where we were invited to be, that they do understand homeopathy a lot better. But yeah, our idea is we want to build a system that is so big, that parallel system, that it just makes the counterpart redundant in all the things that it can, you know, and we will always use that conventional medicine for when we need it. But the truth is, obviously, at the moment, our hospitals are jam-packed of people with chronic issues, which we can resolve. You know, we can get to the roots. So we've got people, you know, getting their diabetic feet cut off because they couldn't stop the addiction and their lifestyle patterns. They were in such, again, that vibrational loop. But if they come to the homeopath and they get homeopathic care and we resolve the issues that have driven them to be stuck in this self-destructive cycle, these people won't be clogging up the hospitals. We can use the hospitals for emergency care like they should always have been used for.
Yeah.
Homeopathy should never have been squashed out, of course.
Wow. Beautiful. So for people that can't make it to Australia, if somebody wanted to, they're intrigued about making this their career. I mean, I'm sure many people listening are already healers of some sort, or someone that's in a career that is not serving them or is soul crushing, and they're like, wow, I want to get into the healing arts and help people and be of service and all of that. Do you have online training available too?
So ours is a worldwide academy. So we've got people in Ireland, all across Europe, a lot of Americans, Canadians, and a lot of Australians, New Zealanders as well. But yeah, so it's fully open worldwide. That 2 years, they have all of their online lectures, and we've got the live touch points, really flexible. A big thing for me was that we need to get this course, make it actually doable for people. So we've got a lot of mums, a lot of stay-at-home mums, and we need to have that level of flexibility that people can be working jobs. Because a lot of people, when they find homeopathy, they're not your 18-year-olds fresh out of school who are living at home who want to study full-time. A lot of our, we've got 570 students at the moment, and they are weaving it in around everyday life. So yeah, that it's really flexible like that.
Cool. Yeah, because it's got to be transitional when you're later in life, right?
You know what though?
Unless you've saved up a good nest egg and you can I'm going to take 2 years off and do this new thing, but that's exceedingly rare. Most people got to pay the bills while they're kind of moving on to something new.
Yeah. And it's the most beautiful thing to hear from these students, like countless. And it's like when they find the truth of homeopathy and they start to research it for themselves, they experience the power of taking a remedy and seeing what the body does. They say, like, this is what I have always been looking for. We've got 68-year-olds in our course, and they're saying, like, my children are saying, I have never seen you this excited. I have never seen you like this. And they're saying, I found my thing, finally. And I think that is the way it is with homeopathy. It sort of finds you, at the right time. And as you learn, it's like, wow. But I think no one who has an experience with homeopathy walks away like the same, because you have a completely different understanding of the whole body and of life, I think.
Back to that parallel system. So, we have the system that exists, right? And it's very flawed, obviously. And then you're talking about creating this new system, and homeopathy was already a threat to some degree to that, what is now the antiquated old system, but was a new one comparatively to homeopathy, which had been around before that. Do you see the reemergence that you're helping to bring forth at any point becoming threatening to the existing establishment, where they're going to try to vilify it or squash it? You were mentioning in Australia, clinicians can't even use ozone to treat people. I'm like, what? Ozone? It's air. It's literally air. It's electrocuted air, but is there a lot of vilification and sort of resistance to homeopathy because it's so effective, or is it less so because you're not selling something that could be considered a drug, or making medical claims, like all of those things that they tend to go after with herbs and different supplements? And
I can't say what it's going to be like. Thus far,
you can't see the future? What?
Thus far, we have been extremely blessed, and it just seems to go like the up and up and up, and just all of these divine circumstances. But I do think that there is a good potential that when they realize, I guess, the mass of people who are moving towards it, and they realize, oh my gosh, our profits are tanking, and these people are getting way too free. Like, they're getting way too switched on in their minds, and we can't control them. Like, we might see pushback, but I have done everything in my reasonable human control to safeguard against that people can't interfere. So we will wait and see. But I really get this feeling that it literally is just like a universal, like a divine thing, that like now is the time. And whatever roadblocks we might have perceived in the past, it's like, even astrologically, it's like that it's just not the time for that. This is the reemergence, this is, we've done our dip down, and now we're coming back to this, new earth sort of creation.
Yeah,
So
I sense that too.
yeah, I don't anticipate, being blocked off. And with the amount of homeopaths like stepping up to the plate, and it's like you can't stop it. They could stop it if it's just a few. You can't stop thousands, growing and growing, growing. So I think it's going to be fine.
Epic.
Yeah.
All right. This is my famous last words. Last question, and then I think of 10 more questions. Let me just say this. Next question. I mentioned earlier, the popularity of microdosing, which is, I think, a really positive thing for people. I think, I took some mushrooms this morning, actually. Feeling pretty good. I mean, a very small amount, of course.
Nice.
But, psychedelic medicine has kind of come back to the forefront, and I think it's largely a positive thing for society. It's been a very positive thing for me on my own healing journey on so many levels, physically and otherwise. Is there any future for a homeopathic psychedelic? I mean, could one make a remedy with DMT that's not, psychoactive in the gross sense, but is helping you tap into the unseen realms and, have a more direct experience with the spiritual part of yourself?
I was at a conference recently and they did a presentation on this. So, homeopathic ayahuasca, homeopathic psilocybin, and these, and you've got marijuana, cannabis in the homeopathic. In regards to their effects and what you actually see in that, I'm not sure that you actually get that level, of that spiritual experience when you take them necessarily. For some people, yes, definitely, but not the great majority, I think, is what I took away from it. But what I think is that when you find that remedy that is well indicated to the individual, right, their constitution, this is when, one of the first signs that a homeopathic remedy is it's resonating, it's doing something, is that people's dreams change immediately. They start having very profound dreams. And they'll say, whoa, I'm like dreaming about, oftentimes it's dreaming about ex-boyfriends or ex-girlfriends or things that have caused heartbreak and grief. And they'll think, whoa, I've not thought about this person in a long time. Or old situations, just from childhood, things that whoa, why am I dreaming about that? And I think that when you get that well-indicated remedy for the individual, you have your most profound spiritual experiences. And this is where, I'll tell you one case example, a woman with severe IBS. She could hardly leave the house anymore. It was that bad. 20 years she had been struggling with it. You go back through the case and it's okay, what was happening in the years preceding the IBS? Because she didn't have it since she was a child. It was around 18. And it's I had a really bad breakup and it just out of the blue, just shocked me, dropped me to my knees. And from that moment on, she became very much trying to control the outside world because it had shocked her. It caught her so off guard. Then she had this full-on sort of anxiety, and trying to control the outside world to try and prevent something like that ever happening again. And the IBS that manifested as a result of that. So then she takes the homeopathic remedy, Arsenicum album, one of our biggest for people with IBS. And she says, I never told you, but I have dreamt about that partner pretty much every night since that breakup. For all of these years, I've still dreamt of that person. And then taking the Arsenicum album, and it's I did not dream, I've not dreamt of them in a week. And it was breaking that sort of spiritual thing. And they had not spoken in all of this time, right? 20 years, they've been broken up, IBS. You're going from 18 years old to 38 years old. She takes her remedy and 2 weeks after that, her IBS is she's noticing some changes, but then he calls out of the blue. So he's a friend of a friend and he's been able to track her down and he calls. And you look at the vibrational nature of this universe and the way, and this sort of stuff happens all the time, that her vibration had changed. She had let go of all of that level of unhealthy attachment and everything that was going on there. And then he calls and they have a conversation, and it might just be he was going through something. I think he was going through a divorce much later on in life, and he realized, and then he's having these recollections of, I've treated people poorly and I want to make amends for it. And so then he wants to call and apologize. But that is the nature of homeopathic medicine. So when we're talking about profound spiritual experiences, you can have those sorts of things with homeopathy where life just lines up. Like the universe is like, okay, let's get these things sorted for you, which I find so beautiful. But yeah, the depths of healing with, say, like this crude doses of psilocybin, it would be different. It's different spiritual healing.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I'm just thinking, like, if someone, say there's a heroic dose of LSD or DMT or something, right? Yep. And what you described of people kind of going back in their lives in the dreams, right? And you're, oh, why am I dreaming about this thing? I mean, that's like what happens kind of in the microcosm of a journey, right? As your subconscious opens up and you're going back to things that you never thought about before, you know, memories that had been suppressed and now are arising to be dealt with. But it can be quite difficult and sometimes alarming when the experience is so intense in such a short period of time. So that's what got me thinking, well, what if you had DMT over the course of 5 years?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, probably like a full dose homeopathic, if you parsed it out, would take you 20 years to take that dose if you're talking about, you know,
for sure,
1 part per 1,000 or something, right? So that's what kind of got me thinking on that train of thought. But it sounds like people are having those kind of experiences over the course of time with other preparations that aren't derived from any psychoactive plants, you know. So
because one thing that we find is sometimes when people do use like drugs or even psychedelics, sometimes they actually can't integrate back into their body. You even see this in people who've never been well since general anesthetic, right? Like it's just, they seem almost a little bit zombified. Like they're not, something's happened, like their spirit has left their body for this and then they're not the same. And they can have like other accompanying physical things. When you give the homeopathic remedy, say for someone, if they had trouble integrating after using some hardcore drugs, you can bring them right back into their body.
Interesting.
So you would use homeopathic ayahuasca to mirror that resonance to their body to sort of trigger, you know, the healing if they struggled. Yeah, if it was just too much for them to cope with. Yeah.
I think many of us have met people that have done too much medicine.
Yes. And then they're completely ungrounded, right? It's
I met someone like that recently and I was like, whoa, good warning, Luke, pump the brakes, man. Like, I mean, you know, amazing, a great person, but just like, whoa, like way too many psychedelics, in my opinion, you know?
Yeah.
Just kind of hard to ground with and
it's like they're not really here.
Difficult to have.
You know, they've been gone for so much.
Difficult to have a conversation, you know, and I guess that's one of the risks of spending too much time out in the quantum and you're still in a body, right? It's like, I think that people sometimes get confused that we're meant to live out there all the time. But if we were, we wouldn't be alive in a body anymore.
Yeah, yes. That's the beauty. And it's like so much of the lessons and it's in the body. It's in this real messy life, you know, the real human experience that we grow so much. So like you dip off into the spiritual aspects to, you know, learn and go a bit deeper. But I reckon it's here that we learn the most. We see the most.
Boots on the ground, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to let people know they can go to your website, remedycollective.org/Luke Storey. There's a code there called Luke, per usual, and it gets you 10% off. And it's RMDY Collective, remedycollective.org/Luke Storey. And we'll put that in the show notes along with everything else that we talked about. If someone, you know, obviously working with a practitioner would be optimal if someone's dealing with something more serious. But when we were talking about the first aid kit, like the kit that I have here, could any random person just buy that and start kind of experimenting with it based on the booklet? Like I did, I just looked up ears, boom, and made my own little.
Yeah, that's what most people do for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if it's something that's a bit more challenging, you probably wouldn't want to cowboy it and try and figure out yourself.
Yeah. And then they can go to our website and there is a list of some practitioners there.
Oh, cool.
That they can book in and see and get to the roots of what's going on.
Awesome. Well, man, I'm so glad we got to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited. I'm like, I can't wait to dive into this.
Yeah, we totally have to have a chat and see what remedies resonate.
Yeah, I want to really get on board with this. As I said, Alec and I share a lot of the same interest and we kind of at times, I think, vet guests for each other because we have, I don't know, we're interested in the same things and also have certain standards of like really wanting to validate something before we, share it with the world without any kind of discrimination or prudence, But when he told me about you and I listened to that podcast, I was like, God damn it, thank God. I could have never met you. And this is something that could potentially change my life and the lives of so many other people, and maybe even Cookie with her breathing issue. And I'm just like, oh, thank you, God.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that our paths crossed today.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I do have one last question for you, and this will be the last one. Who have been 3 influences or inspirations that have made you who you are today? It could be a person, a book, a philosophy.
I mean, I would have to say Samuel Hahnemann.
Clearly.
When I read even the things that he wrote like hundreds of years ago, it is the most beautiful writing. Like he's just so amazing. I love him.
Is it, pardon my interruption, but is any of his writing in your guide booklet in here?
No, I'll have to send you some because it's
written in kind of an old-timey language.
Yeah.
Your booklet, I looked it up and I'm like, this is not like a modern parlance,
Yes.
It's like a little bit, it's got a little antiquated sort of,
Yeah.
Which I thought was
rubbed
cool.
Off on me. Yeah.
Which I thought was cool. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. It doesn't look like website copy,
Yeah. That old school
it takes
style.
a little bit of, creative reading to kind of get what it's saying, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah. So I'd say Samuel Hahnemann. I mean, can I put my parents in as like one? Because it's like,
yeah, that's fair.
The way I'm so grateful for like the beauty that each of them instilled like in me when I think like, oh, I just wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now if it wasn't for just the way that they are, the way that they raised us. So I'm extremely grateful for them. And probably Peter, to be honest, that first homeopath who ever, for whatever reason, said to me in class, you'd be a good homeopath, you'd love it, and he just used to pester me. And then here he is, one of my best friends, and working together, he is probably like the modern day Samuel Hahnemann. He's a guy who he's just spent so much time dedicated to the work, right? Like all of it behind closed doors, no big online presence, nothing, just tucked away, reading, learning, becoming this absolute like amazing homeopath. And so to have him teaching our students is such a blessing. Working with him, has rubbed off on me so much of the success in clinic, that I've had. I would, say it's because of him, of his techniques, what he taught me. So definitely I would say Peter.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.